Hey everybody, Yankee here. Today I want to take some time and address a question I've received a couple of times lately that I think I've answered before. In fact, I'm pretty sure I did a video on this about 4 or 5 years ago. But I don't mind redoing a little short video here when people have questions. I always try to remember that not everyone was here 3 or 4 years ago, so some people probably missed what I said. So I'll say it again. And that question that I'm talking about right now is, what do I mean when I say staging the trigger on a revolver? It's a term I use every now and then. And then I want to address, is it something you actually want to do? And if so, when do you want to do it and when do you not want to do it? All right, now staging the trigger is actually very simple. Now, normally when you pull the trigger on a double action, single action firearm, you're going to pull it all the way back till it fires, let it go. When you're staging the trigger, you're not going to do the full double action pull. You're just going to pull it back quickly and far enough that it actually cycles the gun. It rotates the cylinder and gets the hammer back. Like that right there. You can see the cylinder is fully turned. The hammer is back. Now, I don't have that long take up. I can actually just pull the trigger and it's more like a single action pull. If you notice there, the gun didn't really move at all when I released that hammer because all I had to do was break that plane on the trigger and it fired much like a single action trigger. And that is staging the trigger. All right, now that we've discussed what staging the trigger is it something you would ever want to do? Well, there are times when you would want to do it, like if you're at the range and you're practicing getting jagged little holes or hitting bullseyes and you don't want to thumb back the hammer. That's a good time to do that. When you're playing around, when you're trying to be as accurate as possible. And I've also heard, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard from some people on the internet that when they competed in a marksmanship training at their county fair with revolvers, they weren't allowed to cock the hammer. They had to pull the trigger to actually shoot the gun. So if you're doing that where you're involved in a competition where you can't pull the hammer back, well then staging that trigger might be a good idea. It's kind of a way of getting around the rules. All right, now how about self-defense? Would you ever stage the trigger during a self-defense shooting? Probably not. Wouldn't be a really good idea. In fact, I had some person ask me, well, what if someone's giving me trouble and I draw my gun? Should I stage my trigger and be ready to shoot in case they don't back off? And that way, if they don't back off, I can shoot quicker and more accurately? No, you don't want to do that. The main reason is because if you do that, you're probably going to fire the gun because you're going to be a little stronger than you're used to when that adrenaline's flowing. And how much energy it's going to take to pull that trigger back far enough to stage the trigger when you're under that kind of stress is probably going to be different than what it was when you were practicing. And like I said, you're probably going to shoot somebody. And you don't want to shoot somebody prematurely. So don't do it during a normal self-defense situation. Now, what if it's one of those situations where you're like at the mall and someone is coming in with a machete and slicing people up, or perhaps they have a gun doing something bad with it, and you want to take them out from a distance and you want to make your first shot count? Well, you still wouldn't do it because you would just cock the hammer. That's going to make it easier to shoot than staging the trigger. So just utilize that single action feature. A lot of people like to demonize that and say, oh no, if you cock your hammer, you're going to jail. That is not based in reality at all. There were very few bad judgments made by judges in the past that have been overturned because that was a ridiculous concept. That's what the guns are designed to do. If you need to be accurate at distance to save someone else's life, that's when that single action comes in handy. So use it then. Don't try to stage your trigger. Now, there is a time during a self-defense use that you might want to stage the trigger. Like I said, if that person is at distance from you and you're trying to save someone's life before they're hacked to bits or shot or whatever, there are some times with some guns you might want to stage the trigger. Let's say you have a revolver that can't be shot single action. It's double action only, like this bobbed hammered Colt right here. Then you might want to stage the trigger. I would keep the gun perfectly on target in case you over pull the trigger in that situation. But if you are trained enough and competent enough to actually do it, staging that trigger before you make that first shot will give you the advantage of being more accurate with your double action only gun and make it less likely that you give away your location without actually hitting the target. And the same can be said for guns that have internal hammers, like the Kimber K6S here. You could do the same thing with this gun. Since you cannot fire it in single action, If you want to have the most accurate shot you can have with your first shot, once again, so you don't give away your location without hitting the bad guy, you could stage the trigger. I myself wouldn't. I would just shoot and hope I'm good enough to hit the target. These double action guns usually have very good triggers, but if I wasn't certain and I need to be as accurate as possible and I was competent enough to do it, I could stage that trigger and then have that single action like pull to be more accurate with my first shot. And since your goal is always to hit as soon as possible and to stop the threat with as few shots as possible, having that little extra advantage on your first shot is something that you can argue for, although even in those circumstances, I myself wouldn't do it because I still think there's a better alternative to actually staging the trigger in situations like that, and that is carry a revolver that's double action, single action, and has a hammer. That's why I don't care for double action only revolvers or internal hammer revolvers. They're not my favorites. I only own one or two of them. Almost all of my revolvers have hammers that you can cock back and have that single action pull, but they still have a good double action pull. So choose a gun like the Colt here that has a great double action pull, but still has the option of the single action pull, and then you don't have to worry about things like staging the trigger.